All right, we're recording. So tonight we're doing module 8, which is sniffing. So we're going to summarize sniffing concepts, demonstrate the different sniffing techniques, what type of tools are out there, and then explain some countermeasures. Okay, so network sniffing. Packet sniffing. Packet sniffing is the process of monitoring and capturing all data packets passing through a given network using a software application or hardware device. It allows an attacker to observe and access the entire network traffic from a given point. Packet sniffing allows an attacker to gather sensitive information such as telnet passwords, email traffic, syslog data, and all sorts of things. That is not an all-inclusive list. That's just a bunch of things that you can do. How they work, it turns the NIC or network card of a system into promiscuous mode so that it listens to everything that's transmitted on its segment. So you can see here, you have a nice little graphic of what that looks like. So remember us talking about passive and active. There's passive and active sniffing. Passive refers to sniffing through a hub, wherein the traffic is sent to all ports and involves monitoring packets sent by others without sending any additional data packets in the network traffic. In a network that uses hubs to connect systems, all hosts on the network can see all the traffic, and therefore the attacker can easily capture traffic going through the hub. Hub usage is an outdated approach, so most modern networks use switches. So passive sniffing is harder to do now. Active sniffing, which is what you have to do for switch-based networks. It involves injecting address resolution or ARP packets into the network to flood the switch's content. Addressable memory or CAM table, which keeps track of the host port connections. And there's some active sniffing techniques. There's MAC flooding, DNS poisoning, ARP poisoning, DHCP attacks, switch port stealing, and spoofing.
What category would Wireshark, just like a simple PCAP, fall into?
Wireshark can be used for both passive and active. So, but usually Wireshark is used for active.
Cool.
Okay. How an attacker hacks the network using a sniffer. So attacker connects to his desktop or laptop using switch. They run discovery tools to learn about network topology. They identify the victim's machine to target their attacks. Then they poison the victim's machine. In this case, they're using ARP spoofing. And then the traffic destined for the victim's machine is redirected to the attacker. And then the hacker extracts things like passwords and sensitive data. Protocols, these are ones that are vulnerable to sniffing. Telnet and rlogon, these you can get keystrokes, including usernames and passwords, because they're sent in clear text. IMAP, passwords and data also sent in clear text. Notice a pattern here. HTTP, data sent in clear text. SMTP and NNTP, passwords sent in clear text. POP, passwords and data sent in clear text. And then FTP, same thing. Data is sent in clear text. Sniffing in the data link layer of the OSI model. Okay, so remember the OSI model? It's been a while, but sniffers operate in the data link layer of the OSI model. Networking layers in the OSI model are designed to work independently of each other. If a sniffer sniffs data in the data link layer, the upper OSI layers will not be aware of the sniffing. So you can see on this one, see your data link, initial compromise, and then it compromises things up here, but it doesn't below it. But it's possible for those to be compromised, but they don't see it because they're not on the same link or the same layer, sorry. Hardware protocol analyzers. So a hardware protocol analyzer are actually a lot of fun to use. Is a piece of equipment that captures signals without altering traffic in a cable segment. It can be used to monitor network usage and identify malicious network traffic generated by hacking software installed in the network. It captures data packet, decodes it, and analyzes its contents based on predetermined rules. It allows the attacker to see individual data bytes of each packet passing through the cable. So here are some different ones that you can get, and then they have some example pictures over here as well. The ones that I've seen, they usually look like a laptop just because they're easier to carry around. Span port. A span port is a port that's configured to receive a copy of every packet that passes through a switch. When connected to the span port, an attacker can compromise the entire network. So here's an example of what this would look like. You have all your hosts, you have your span port, and then your IDS port. And as you can see here, they've just kind of routed everything through and they can see everything that comes through. Wiretapping. Wiretapping is the process of monitoring, so telephone or internet conversations by a third party. Attacker connects a listening device. They can be hardware, software, or a combo to the circuit carrying information between two phones or hosts on the internet. It allows an attacker to monitor, intercept, access, and record information contained in a data flow and communication system. So again, we have active and passive. So active, it monitors, records, alters, and also injects data into the communication or traffic. Passive only monitors and records the traffic. So basically it monitors, records, and just collects any knowledge there. So the big thing to know about wiretapping, which all of us should know, technically in the United States, you need a warrant. Because if you do it without a warrant, you are doing it illegally and you can be arrested. Lawful interception. So this refers to a legally intercepted data communication between two endpoints for surveillance on the traditional communications or VoIP data and multi-service networks. So as you can see here, this is where they do the wiretaps, the court-ordered wiretaps. You have like the rerouted things where it's been rerouted by the law enforcement agency. So an example of this, a lot of times they'll do things like this with kiddie porn cases. They'll do a long-term, basically they do a surveillance on their internet, and then over a period of time, they reroute and monitor over that period of time to see if that person, after they've gotten their warrant, if that person is having that problem or doing
So where's the one or the page that shows NSA's interception of all our signal traffic?
They don't have that officially. No, they absolutely do, but they don't. I don't think they really talk about that on here.
I've seen more than a few data centers.
Yeah, and then they got in trouble recently for. They said that I don't know if you guys saw the article where recently they found out that the NSA has been going out and to dark web brokers and buying traffic. I saw was like, I'm not surprised, really, honestly.
That's really not all that new, though. I mean, they've been buying the data that you agree to share with consumer companies since forever, basically. Yeah, but now they're kind of in trouble now for they actually get caught doing it. So okay, so I'm sorry, what? So in other words, they got a slap on the wrist and told bad.
Probably, yeah. Yeah, until they have a major scandal about it, I don't see that really doing anything. At least that's been historically what happens. So MAC address and CAM tables. Each switch has a fixed size dynamic CAM table. This table stores information such as MAC addresses available on physical ports with their associated VLAN parameters or virtual LAN parameters. Hey, don't get in a fight on top of my foot. MAC addresses. So there are, sorry, I have a cat attached to me. Come here. They're all super lovey right now. So you have the 3 bytes, organizational unique identifier, and then you have the network controller or NIC specific on there, and you can see they've got A2. You see the unicast, multicast, and then you can see global, unique, and locally administrated. If that's what they're trying to point out is what those do. And then the CAM table is over here. So you can see the VLAN, the MAC, the type, learn, age, and which ports. So how does the CAM work? So on one, you see MAC A. You see those ARP goes out, and then you can see that it goes out to port 1. B is unknown, broadcasts the ARP. Port 2 for this one goes out to MAC B, and then port 3 goes out to MAC C. And then you can see it says, okay, C3, this is where that is at. And are you guys kind of understanding this, what this actually looks like? And then it goes out and looks for it, and it gets a reply, and it says, okay, I'm actually MAC B, and then you see B2. Okay, yeah, it's a nice little graphic, this one. So if you have a problem with CAM tables, usually the only reason I have CAM tables up is just to look at raw data. So, or if you want to know next what happens when they're full. Once they're full on a switch, additional ARP requests, traffic, they flood every port on the switch. So that's usually why we need to know what happens. Because this is something that's forced in order to do ARP floods. This changes the behavior of the switch and resets it to learning mode, broadcasting on every port, and it turns it basically into a hub. So then then you go from that problem where you go from a regular switch where you have to do active, and then it flips over to hub basically, and now you can do passive because you no longer need all the other stuff because it just turned it over into a hub. MACs and ARP tables are they're for name resolution, and usually the MACs can be used for filtering as well. If you're doing if you're doing whitelisting and filtering, you can use them for that too. So when they do these attacks, they fill the CAM tables of adjacent switches too. And then you basically turn those into hubs as well. So you get a whole bunch of passive sniffing. Okay, MAC flooding. So that's the one we were just talking about. So you flood the CAM table with fake MAC addresses and IP pairs until it's full. Then it rolls into acting like a hub, and it broadcasts those packets to all machines on the network, and the attackers can have nice passive sniffing and get that stuff out of there. So you can use things like MacOff, which is a Unix Linux tool. And this one sends out random source MAC and IP addresses, and then it floods the switch CAM tables. As you can see on this one, it does about 131,000 per minute by sending bogus MAC entries. So it just absolutely goes nuts after that. Switch port stealing. The switch port stealing sniffing technique uses MAC flooding, which is what we were just doing there, and then it uses it to sniff the packets. The attacker floods the switch with forged gratuitous ARP packets with the target MAC address as the source and their address as the destination. A race condition of the attacker's flooded packets and the target host's packet occurs, and thus the switch must change its MAC address, binding constantly between two different ports. So in such a case, if the attacker is fast enough, they'll be able to direct the packets intended for the target host towards his or her port. So they now have a lot of tools that just automate that. So it's not so much if they're fast enough, it's if their tool is fast enough. The attacker now manages to steal the target host's switch port and send ARP requests to the stolen switch port to discover the target host IP address. When the attacker gets an ARP reply, this indicates the target's host switch port binding has been restored, and the attacker can now sniff the packets sent towards the targeted host. So, how to defend against MAC attacks? Basically, the biggest thing you need to do is to correctly configure your port security. So if you can look, this one right here is configuring port security on a Cisco switch. And these are basically, you can set your maximum VLAN access. You can do violation restrictions, meaning that when you get a violation, after you can set a certain number so that it's like, no, you can't just flood this time after time after time. And it'll still keep going. There's an aging time limit, an aging type inactivity that you can do. And then there's traps port security trap rate that you can do as well. And then you can also do one MAC address allowed on the switch. So port security can be used to restrict your inbound traffic. Only a select set of MAC addresses, and that will also help limit your MAC flooding. Does that make sense? I know it's a little bit high level on some things, but mostly it's just how they do it is just overwhelming numbers. Yeah, it's a really good idea to watch some numbers on. If you go out and watch MAC flooding on YouTube, just watch how they do it. It really is better to see how it's done live. DHCP starvation attacks. So this is a DOS attack on the DHCP server where the attacker broadcasts forged DHCP requests and tries to lease all of the DHCP addresses available in the DHCP scope. Therefore, the legitimate users are unable to obtain or renew IP addresses requested via DHCP, and then they fail to get access to the network. So it's actually kind of a pretty cool concept if you think about it. They're just taking up all of the legit numbers, and so the legitimate users can't get to it. So then you have a whole list of the DHCP starvation attack tools over here on the right. Yeah, it works a lot better for smaller networks. For larger networks, it's not as great. Rogue DHCP server attack. This attacker sets up a rogue DHCP server on the network. This is why we've talked about things like having stuff that scans for rogue devices. And it responds to DHCP requests with bogus IP addresses, resulting in compromised network access. This attack works in conjunction with the DHCP starvation attack. The attacker can send an TCP/IP setting to the user after knocking them off from the genuine server, and then they give them the bogus settings. So how do you defend against these? Again, you enable port security, and then you also enable DHCP snooping, which allows the switch to accept a DHCP transaction directed from a trusted port. And these are the commands on this as well. Basically, and you can see there, there's some notes on there. Not all ports on the VLAN are not trusted by default. So there's some things you just have to know on those as well. Here's some other stuff, MAC limiting configurations. So if you're using Juniper switches, these are some configurations for those. And then configuration DHCP filtering on a switch over here for that. Have any of you, we use Juniper switches. We switched from Cisco to Juniper switches at the district. They were actually really nice. So don't be afraid of their switches if you ever get the chance to use them. They're just different command base. ARP spoofing. So how does this work? Our address resolution protocol is a stateless protocol for resolving IP addresses for a Mac machine or a MAC address. ARP packets can be forged to send data to the attacker's machine. ARP spoofing involves constructing many forged ARP requests and reply packets to overload the switch. Sound familiar? The switch is set to forwarding mode after the ARP table is flooded with the spoof ARP replies, and the attacker can then sniff all the network packets. Attackers flood a target computer's ARP cache with forward entries, which is also known as poisoning. So if you look over here, this is just a graphic of exactly what we were talking about. So what are the threats of ARP poisoning? Using fake ARP messages, an attacker can divert all communications between two machines, and resulting in all traffic being exchanged via the attacker's PC. So packet sniffing, session hijacking, VoIP call tapping, manipulation of data, man-in-the-middle attacks, data interception, connection hijacking, connection resetting, stealing passwords, and DOS attacks. Here is a nice little list of some ARP poisoning tools. EtherCap is the one that I've seen the most. I think that one is either included in itself. It might be on Parrot. I know it's on Kali. And it might also be part of Metasploit. So how do you defend against these? You implement dynamic ARP inspection using DHCP snooping binding table. So this is an example of what this looks like right here. And then it says check the MAC and IP fields to see if the ARP from the interface is in the binding, and if it's not, the traffic is blocked. Configuring DHCP snooping and dynamic ARP inspection on Cisco. So here's a nice little table that gives you a bunch of different commands and what that looks like here. Here are some ARP spoofing detection tools, and there you go. Wireshark has some nice stuff in there too, but there is also ARP-on and some other things there too. MAC spoofing and duplication is really, really not hard at all. A MAC duplicating attack is launched by sniffing a network for MAC addresses of clients who are actively associated with a switch port and reusing one of those addresses. By listening to the traffic on the network, a malicious user can intercept and use legitimate user's MAC address to receive all the traffic destined for the user. This attack allows the attacker to gain access to the network and take over someone's identity on the network. So you can see a little graphic of what this looks like down here. And it can also be used to bypass WAPs, wireless access point MAC filtering. So here's a MAC spoofing technique from Windows. Method 1, the network interface card supports a clone MAC address. And then if the network card, a lot of them do, you can do these steps to clone it. It's really not hard. You basically just go in and clone them. But there are also, this is MAC spoofing. And then here's the ones that I've, oh, come here, grumpy cat. I know. SMAC is the one that I've seen used, and I think MAC address changer is the other one. But there's a ton of them out there because MAC spoofing is really not very difficult. IDRP spoofing, ICMP router discovery protocol, or IDRP or IRDP, is routing protocol allows the host to discover the IP addresses of active routers on the subnet by listening to router advertisement and soliciting messages on their network. The attacker sends a spoofed IRDP router advertisement message to the host on the subnet, causing it to change its default router to whatever the attacker wants it to be. This attack allows the attacker to sniff the traffic and collect valuable information from the packets. Then the attacker uses the IRDP spoof to launch man-in-the-middle, DOS, and passive sniffing attacks. VLAN hopping, this is a technique used to target network resources present on a virtual LAN. It can be performed by using two primary methods, switch spoofing and double tagging. Attackers perform VLAN hopping attacks to steal sensitive information like passwords, modify, corrupt, or delete data, install malicious codes or programs, and spread viruses, trojans, and worms throughout the network. And you can see here switch spoofing. The attacker connects a rogue switch to the network by tricking a legitimate switch and thereby creating a trunk link between them. Double tagging, the hackers add and modify tags in the Ethernet frame, thereby allowing the flow of traffic through any VLAN in the network. STP attack. Attackers connect a rogue switch into the network. This is, again, why you have stuff to scan for that, and change the operators of the STP protocol and sniff all the network traffic. Attackers configure the rogue switch such that its priority is less than that of any other switch in the network, which makes it the root bridge, thus allowing the attackers to sniff all traffic flowing the network. There's a nice little graphic there. So how do you defend against MAC spoofing? You use your DHCP, they keep saying the same thing over and over again, but DHCP snooping binding table, dynamic ARP inspection, and IP source guard. For VLAN hopping, you configure the ports as access ports and ensure that all access ports are configured not to negotiate trunks. Then you ensure that all trunk ports are configured not to negotiate other trunks. And then for double tagging, ensure that each access port is assigned with VLAN except the default VLAN. And you can see there's some other steps here too. Sorry, I'm just going to scroll down here and see how far we are. So I don't want to run you guys too far through. Okay, STP attacks. You can use BPDU guard. This enables the guard on all port fast edge. Basically, you just configure that to guard against it. You have loop guard to guard against loops, then you have root guard, and then you have unidirectional link detection. Okay. DNS poisoning techniques. This is actually the one that we hear about a lot. ARP and DNS are the two that we hear the most about. DNS poisoning is a technique that tricks the DNS server into believing that it has received authentic information when it's not received any. It results in the substitution of a false IP address at DNS level where the web addresses are converted into numeric IP addresses. It allows the attacker to replace IP address entries for a target site on a given DNS server with the IP address of a server they control. The attacker can create fake DNS entries for the server, which has malicious content, with a name similar to that of the target server. So there's intranet. In this technique, the attacker system must be connected to the LAN to be able to sniff the packets. It works well against switches with ARP poison routers. Internet. This is where you do the DNS spoofing, where you do things, the attacker infects the machine with a Trojan, and then it changes their DNS to a different IP address. And then you see there's a little explanation of what that looks like here. Then there's proxy server DNS poisoning. The attacker sends a Trojan that changes their proxy server settings to that of the attacker and redirects them to a fake site. Then there's DNS cache poisoning. This refers to altering and adding forged DNS records into the DNS resolver cache so that a DNS query is redirected to a malicious site. If the DNS resolver cannot validate the DNS responses have been received from an authoritative source, it will cache the incorrect entries locally, and then it serves those out to the users. So it thinks, oh, these are right, and then gives the malicious ones out. Derp and spoof, gotta love some of the names here. DNS poisoning tools. Then, they have some other ones like DNS spoof, DNS poison, EtterCap again, and down here. So here are some examples of how you defend against it. So you implement DNSSEC, which is basically just a secure DNS. Use SSL for traffic, resolve DNS queries to local DNS servers, block DNS requests to external servers, configure firewall to restrict external DNS lookup, implement an IDS, configure a DNS resolver to use a new random source port for each outgoing query, restrict the DNS recursive service, full or partial, to authorized servers, users, not servers. Use DNS non-existent domain rate limiting, secure internal machines, use a static ARP and IP table, use SSH, which is secure shell encryption. Do not allow outgoing traffic to use UDP port 53 as a default source port, and audit DNS server regularly.
I do have a question for that last slide where it says step 3, it says resolve all queries to a local DNS server. So on our project for last semester where we had to set up the different servers and all that, we had it running through a local server. So then would that only protect against the internet and the proxy server techniques? Like would if an attacker got on the LAN, would they still be able to infect it?
It is possible once you're already in the LAN to do that. So
Cool.
that's where you want to have all this SSL and everything else. It's better to do that if it's possible.
Okay, cool. I thought so. I wanted to.
Yeah, no, that is a very good point. Okay, using sniffing tools. Now, Wireshark is probably one of the best known, and you'll see this tool pop up over and over again. So this one lets you capture and interactively browse the traffic. You'll see this over here. You can use it it uses WinPCAP to capture packets on its own, and it captures live network traffic. And you can see right here, and it has a set of filters. It has all sorts of stuff you can customize. It's really nice for that. Okay, so follow TCP stream and Wireshark. And you can see here's just an example. And so they went down and they're like, okay, what's this? Oh, look at that. We found the password. Display filters. These are display filters that you can use to change the view of the packets. These are additional Wireshark filters that you can play with. And these just change the different values so that you can view things. There's some other sniffing tools. There's Riverbed Packet Analyzer, and there's CAPSA Portable Network Analyzer. There's OmniPeak, and then there's a couple of them down here. PRTG Network Monitor is actually really cool too. It's not as in-depth, but it does give you some nice dashboard graphics. Okay, last section. Defending against the dark sniffing arts, or in this case, sniffing countermeasures. Restrict physical access. That's usually one of the best things you can do, because there are all sorts of things that you can do when you can physically plug into the network when it comes to sniffing. So restrict physical access to network media to ensure packet sniffers cannot be installed. Use end-to-end encryption to protect confidential information. Permanently add MAC address of the gateway to the ARP cache. Use static IP addresses and ARP tables to prevent attackers from adding spoofed ARP entries for machines in the network. Turn off network identification broadcasts, and if possible, restrict the network to authorized users to protect the network from being discovered with sniffing tools. Use IPv6 instead of 4. Use encrypted sessions, such as SSH instead of Telnet, SCP instead of FTP, SSL for email connections to protect wireless networks users against sniffing attacks. So basically, encrypt wherever possible is what they're saying there. So HTTPS instead of HTTP, which really they should be. Use a switch instead of a hub, as a switch delivers data to the intended recipient only. Use SFTP instead of FTP. Use PGP, SMIME, VPN, IPsec, SSL, TLS, SSH, and one-time passwords. Always encrypt wireless traffic with a strong encryption protocol. Don't use WPA, always use WPA 2 or 3. Retrieve the MAC directly from the NIC instead of the operating system, because that prevents MAC address spoofing. Use tools, well, it doesn't always prevent it, but it's more likely to prevent it than it would be the other way. Use tools to determine if any NICs are running in promiscuous mode. Use access control lists to allow access to a fixed range of trusted IP addresses in a network. So, how do you detect sniffing? Check the devices running in promiscuous mode. So you need to check which machines are running in promiscuous mode, because promiscuous mode allows the network device to intercept and read each network packet that arrives. Run your IDS, your intrusion detection system, and see if the MAC address of any of the machines has changed. IDS can alert the administrator about suspicious activities. And then you can run your network tools, such as CAPSA Portable Network Analyzer, to monitor network for strange packets, which enables you to collect, consolidate, centralize, and analyze your traffic data across different network resources and technologies. So this is the ping and DNS method. So for sniffer detection. So the ping method, you can see here, it sends a ping request to the suspect machine with its IP address and an incorrect MAC address. Ethernet adapter rejects it as the MAC address does not match, whereas the suspect machine running the sniffer responds to it as it does not reject packets with different MAC addresses. And that'll tell you, okay, there might be an issue there. The DNS method, most of the sniffers perform reverse DNS lookup to identify the machine from the IP addresses. A machine generating reverse DNS lookup traffic is very likely to be running a sniffer. So ARP method, only the machine in the promiscuous mode, on this one it's machine C, caches the ARP information. A machine in the promiscuous mode responds to ping message as it has correct information about the host sending ping requests in its cache. The rest of the machines will send an ARP probe to identify the source of the ping request. And you can set filters in your network to basically let you know, hey, this is what this is doing. And here are some promiscuous detection tools. So Nmap and NetScan Tools Pro are both considered tools for that. So Nmap, one of those NSE scripts. So I don't know if you remember me scrolling up when I was showing you Nmap, and it had that whole section that had the -- script. that's where you'll find some of the explanations for the NSE scripts. And NetScan Tools Pro has basically a promiscuous mode scanner that will help you go out and scan your subnets for network interfaces that are listening for all Ethernet packets in promiscuous mode, and that'll help you possibly lock down some things you need to have locked down. Okay, so that wasn't as bad as some of our other ones. That is it for the lecture portion. So I'm going to stop right here. Yeah, no, it wasn't as bad today. Tomorrow is social engineering, so that'll be fun.